At the end of this topic, you will be able to explain the meaning of imperialism and colonialism, describe the major forms of imperialism, discuss the causes for the rise of imperialism. Imperialism. There were great disturbances in the political and economic systems in Europe during the late 19th century and early 20th century. When these European disturbances forced the European nations to spread their authority over the political and economic life of other nations, it was termed as imperialism. The term imperialism originates from the Latin word imperium, meaning power. Imperialism refers to the policy of extending a country's rule over the others or a country's dominance over the political and economic interest of another nation to exploit its natural resources. Colonialism and imperialism. Colonialism refers to the policy adopted by European countries from 1492 to 1763 AD. In this era, colonies were established in the Asian and American continents by England, France, Spain, and Portugal. Colonialism refers to the policy of acquiring and maintaining colonies, particularly for exploitation. It is a relationship between an indigenous majority and minority foreign invaders. Imperialism is a state policy and is developed for ideological and financial reasons. Imperialism is the concept, while colonialism is the practice. The European countries were involved in a number of wars and unifications from 1763 to 1870 AD. Italy and Germany established their political and economic power in Africa and Asia after their unification. New imperialism is the policy of imperialism followed by European countries from 1870 to 1945 AD. Major forms of imperialism. In the 19th century, imperialism took two major forms. It was enforced with either direct military intervention or indirect control by establishing a protectorate wherein the mother country served as a guide. Military imperialism. Military imperialism refers to USA's invasion against Iraq with its military power and forced it to have another kind of government that was favorable to USA. Political imperialism. Political imperialism refers to the British conquering territories in India and appointing their own officers and changing the existing political structure. Economical imperialism. Economical imperialism refers to China being politically independent under the Manchu rule, yet economically controlled by European and American countries. Causes for rise of imperialism. Industrial Revolution. Great growth in production due to Industrial Revolution in European countries resulted in the rise of imperialism. Great demand for raw materials and new markets forced European nations to exploit Asia and Africa. As Europe followed a protective trade policy, they could not find a market in Europe. Due to capitalism, the purchasing power of the people was also less. Transport and communication improved, resulting in progress. The whole world was linked by the telegraph system and reduced great distances. The movement of goods between colonies and the mother country increased due to the development of railways. Improvement in transportation in Asia and Africa made it easier to transport raw materials to Europe and export finished goods to markets in the interior parts of the colonies. National security and nationalism. Colonial imperialism spread among the European political groups as a sense of national security and self-sufficiency increased. Due to the influences of businesses, presidents and prime ministers worked towards colonial imperialism. The second half of the 19th century witnessed extreme nationalistic ideals in Europe. Germany and Italy were unified. Many countries took pride in their race, culture, and language and felt superior to other nations. They felt that acquisition of colonies would improve the status of their countries. Europeans were of the opinion that it was the white man's burden to educate the uncivilized native people of Africa and Asia. This was yet another reason for the spread of imperialism. Balance of power and discovery of new routes. The driving force of imperialism was the concept of balance of power. To achieve a balance of power with neighboring nations, European nations were forced to acquire new colonies. Imperialism spread with the discovery of new routes to Africa and Asia. The discovery of sea routes paved the way for traders and soldiers to exploit the abundant wealth of these countries. Growth of population and state of anarchy. Due to population growth and unemployment, Europeans were forced to emigrate in search of new lands and careers overseas. Before the First World War, there was no international organization to enforce laws for nations to maintain peace and security among countries. The resultant state of anarchy helped the spread of imperialism. In this topic, you have learnt imperialism is a policy of extending a country's rule over others, whereas colonialism is a policy of acquiring and maintaining colonies, especially for exploitation. The different forms of imperialism are military, political, and economic imperialism. During the end of the 19th century, more colonies meant an elevated status for European countries. This helped in the spread of imperialism. Many Europeans migrated from Europe to Asian and African countries due to unemployment.